Hey, folks. Welcome to the Reformation Gun Club online hangout it's still February 2021. We just barely got it in. Sorry for the delay in getting things started here. I had to do a reboot right before the show started, and I'm running a couple of minutes late. I apologize for that. It is our February Reformation Gun Club online hangout that we try to do every month with the members of the Reformation Gun Club and the members of the cast. Not sure who's going to show up tonight, so we'll see. But we didn't get to do this in January. A little health issue just popped up. It wasn't the Kung Fu flu. All good. But just wasn't able to make the January one happen. So here we are right at the end of February. And we're glad that you're with us, and hope you'll join us for, if you're a member of the Reformation Gun Club, I've sent out the links to all of our members on MeWe and on Facebook. So hope you'll join us. If you would like to join the Reformation Gun Club and become a member, support the show, and get access to these online hangouts every month, visit armedlutheran.us/gun club. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to our cool new website. You get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive content, invitations to hangouts like this, and the satisfaction of knowing that you helped make everything possible, because Armed Lutheran Radio, as I mention every week, is listener funded, which means we don't have any advertising. We don't have any sponsors. We rely on our Reformation Gun Club members to make this show happen. And so thank you so much to all of our Armed Lutheran Radio listeners. And thank you to our Gun Club members. I'm going to do a little something new this week, a little chyron across the bottom to thank all of our awesome members. Thank you all so much during these crazy economic times for your support. Before we get into, I don't even know what we're going to talk about today, but before we do, I want to mention, or just remind everybody, Duty to Defend I still have signed copies available. If you're interested, check out armedlutheran.us/books for all the information. And then one last bit of housekeeping that I wanted to mention. Coming soon. I have been thinking about this for a while. We've been trending around 110, 115 subscribers, somewhere in that neighborhood. I'd love to see this community grow, just like the community in social media has grown, Facebook and MeWe, and the listeners to the audio podcast has grown. So I think we're going to try to we did this for Facebook, where we were building up the Fans of Armed Lutheran Facebook page. I'd like to do another giveaway. And so I'm thinking of doing something soon to try to build up subscribers here on the YouTube channel. And what we'll do is, once we hit 250 subscribers, we'll do a giveaway. And I've got books to give away. I've got Armed Lutheran swag to give away. I've got a couple of things from Cook's Holsters, and maybe some if you can use them, Lucky Gunner, if you can get some ammo, some Lucky Gunner gift certificates. And we've got books from my library, books donated by one of our awesome members, Calroy from Boron, California, who sent us a book and said, hey, if you got some reloaders in the audience, here's a brand new, still in the packaging book that our members would like to have, so we could make that part of the giveaway. So we're putting together some things to give away, and coming up with some other ideas. So look for information about that soon. All right. So like I said, I don't know who's going to be joining us tonight. I know Pastor Bennett has had, if you listen to tonight's show that was released earlier tonight, Pastor Bennett was not able to join us this week. We did kind of an oldie but a goodie. I pulled out a classic from 2 years ago, I guess, and reworked it for this year's Lenten season. And so we got an old pontification from the pastor. He was very, very busy this week with, of course, with Lent and with some funerals in his congregation. So, as I mentioned in the show, please keep Pastor Bennett and the congregation at St. John Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota, in your prayers. They've had a rough couple of weeks, and for those of you who have been listening the last couple of weeks, we've been through Snowvid here in Texas, as I like to call it. Just as we thought that 2020 was going to be better, or 2021 was going to be better than 2020, not really. Crazy weather has just crippled Texas, and we're only just now getting away from the mask stuff and all of the restrictions. I think it was 2 days ago, the local county judge here in the county where I live issued an announcement that basically rescinded all of the restrictions related to COVID. Basically said, if you want to get a vaccine, great. We're going to do everything we can to make it available for you. And no judgment about whether or not, about your decision. If you decide that you don't want one, fine as well. No judgment. And which I thought was rather refreshing coming from a government official. It was nice to actually have somebody not trying to cram a bunch of stuff down our throats for a change, especially related to COVID. I don't know what effect that will have, because most businesses are still telling us to put the face diapers on. So, and I usually don't. So unless I absolutely have to, like I'm at the doctor's office or something like that, I'm not wearing one. And I don't know what your thoughts are on the vaccines. Or go get them if you feel it necessary. If you don't, it's up to you. And that's been the whole point of our discussions of going back last year. We had lots of big discussions about face masks and about vaccines and about all this stuff and social distancing and getting together in church and whether or not we should have, we should gather in groups and things. And our stance from the very beginning, misinterpreted often as it was it should be up to the individual to make those decisions. And the government shouldn't be cramming that stuff down our throats, as they so often do. But anyway, maybe we're getting a little better here in Texas. I don't know. We'll see. It's very early to tell. The rest of the country is still dealing with idiots like Gavin Newsom and Roy Cooper over in North Carolina and Whitmer in Michigan, who are still trying to keep everybody under lock and key and restrict their movements. So we'll see. We'll see how things go. And then you've got, of course, President Goofball, who can't even remember to keep his own mask on while telling us that we need to be wearing masks. But that's a whole different conversation. We'll delve into that another time. So what have I was expecting to have some guests. I'm trying to find. Let's see. Let me make sure that I got some messages here. Let me check and make sure that those messages went through. And we get some, everybody knows that if they would like to join in, they are welcome. I did see, don't know whether you paid any attention to it today or over the past week. CPAC, of course, was going on, and President Trump made a speech today. I'd be curious to know if anybody had a chance to watch that, and if anybody, what your thoughts were on the reemergence of former President Trump and his speech. Let's see here. Let me get over here and check the Facebook group. Make sure that message went through. Okay, good. And let's see. check and make sure. A lot of our members don't lurk about on Facebook. They prefer MeWe. So let me check over here and make sure that that message went through. Yep. All right. So, and I don't know if the pastor is able to join us tonight. Again, like I said, I just got an email from him right before the show, and he said, "Oh, dang, was that tonight?" So I'm not sure. I expect he'll show up. And if he does, it probably won't be for very long. And the others may have forgotten or didn't notice the announcement anyway. So let's see. I have not been paying attention to anything. I'll be honest. This whole everything that's been going on has been so depressing and so annoying to watch unfold. Everything that we knew would happen when Biden was elected has basically come to fruition. We've seen him pander to all of the extreme elements of his base, and we've seen now the gun control stuff bubble to the fore. Of course, he waited until the Parkland anniversary popped up and announced, wanted Congress to act on his extreme gun control vision. And that's not surprising that he would decide to wait until the Parkland anniversary, right? Use the emotion of that terrible incident and the memories of that terrible incident to try to push forward with your extreme new policies. And they're not new policies, let's be honest. Banning assault weapons and high capacity magazines, and universal background checks is nothing new. It's the same old stuff. And none of it would have stopped Parkland. Parkland is just an excuse to, as Rahm Emanuel likes to say, never let a crisis go to waste. And so that's something that Democrats have been doing for years. No surprises there. Anybody? I don't know what to think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts about whether or not any of this is going to manage to move forward? I've really been surprised. At the same time, not surprised by the squishiness of the Republicans in Congress and in the Senate when it comes to Biden and his nominees. Biden's nominees are the same bunch of nutcases that were Obama's administration people. The same people just cycle right back, and they're Biden's people. And they're still just as extreme as they were, 8 years ago. So, or 4 years ago, whatever it is. Anyway, and I'm surprised, if you recall, right, remember how long it took Trump to get his nominees approved, how hard that he had to fight to get nominees approved by the Democrat largely controlled Senate and House. Well, Senate. And how hard the Democrats fought to prevent his nominees from being approved, and how quickly Biden's nominees have been approved in very short order, despite the fact that they're all pretty extreme. Most notably, the nominee for the assistant, Secretary of Health and Human Services, or the transgender lady person, who refused to answer very basic, very simple questions about genital mutilation for young children. These are pretty extreme people who have been asked very straightforward questions that they simply won't answer, and yet they're still getting approved. Now, I don't know what kind of a fight Republicans, aside from Rand Paul, are putting up, but I'm on the one hand surprised that Republicans aren't putting up a fight. At the same time, I'm not surprised that they're not, because they're generally squishes. and their only talk, their tough talk is only when they want us to vote for them every 2, 4, 6 years, right? It's the same thing. Lather, rinse, repeat. It's talk tough. We got to fight the Democrats. We got to stop. We got to protect the Second Amendment. We got to protect your rights. You got to vote for us. We need control of the House. Oh, well, once we've got control of the House, we can't really do anything unless you get us control of the Senate. Oh, well, we can't really do anything unless you give us control of the White House. Oh, now we've got control of all three. What were we talking about? That seems to happen every time. And then they lose inevitably because people get sick and tired of their BS. And then they do it again. Hey, put us back in office and we'll fight for your rights. Yeah, bullcrap. No, you won't. You'll fight for your office. You'll fight to stay in office. You'll fight for your paycheck. Now we've got this minimum wage thing going on, this fight over the minimum wage, which for some reason has been tied to COVID relief. This new 1.9 trillion, another multi-trillion dollar COVID relief package that nobody really needs, that is 99% not related to COVID. COVID, again, Democrats are milking COVID for all it's worth, right? They used COVID to get the election result they wanted. We talked about that on the show. The results of the 2020 election were driven largely by COVID. COVID allowed Democrats to change all the rules, and here's what we got. And now they're just going to keep using COVID as an excuse to spend money left and right. And none of it's for COVID relief, or next to none of it. So what $15 an hour minimum wage has to do with COVID relief, I don't know. But apparently that's a thing. And so what I think we ought to do is we ought to make the $15 an hour be the wage for our congressmen and our senators, to be honest. That should be what those lunkheads in Washington should be paid, because they do a crap job. They go there and they get rich, and then all they do is fight to keep their jobs, pandering to their base every 4 years instead of actually doing what's right. And I've seen some interesting discussions. Particularly, I'm really impressed with the level of the discussions that I'm seeing going on in our MeWe group. So if you're on MeWe, MeWe.com, come and look for Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. Come and join us, because there's been some really good discussions going on about power and the idea of tyranny and the idea of the Christian response to government authority. The discussions have been really good, and I would encourage you, if you're a member of, if you're a user of that service, come look us up. And that brings me to another point, something that I was thinking about earlier, and wanted to get people's thoughts on. And if you're not here to give your thoughts, that's fine. Share them in the comments. Send us your thoughts at on the feedback page, armedlutheran.us/feedback. Something for us to consider in a future episode. It wasn't that long ago, if you'll recall, that we were talking a lot about cancel culture. We were talking about the Great Divide. We did 2 episodes, if you recall, or not the Great Divide, the Great Disconnect, we called it, which was where we talked about disconnecting ourselves from culture, from the mainstream culture. Because the culture has become toxic. It's become very much antagonistic. If I can speak, that would help. It's become antagonistic towards, and has been for years, let's face it, towards conservatives, towards Christians particularly. We talked a lot about how do we break away from it? How do we change and find alternatives? And we talked a good deal in those 2 episodes. The episodes, I'm not going to even try to remember the numbers. 240 something. Look it up. The Great Divide, the Great Disconnect. 2 episodes that Pastor Bennett and I discussed. And what I've noticed is a lot of people who talked at that time, or about the time that we were discussing it on the show, there was a good deal of discussion about, well, we got to find alternatives. We got to go to Parlay. We've got to go to Gab. We got to get off the mainstream social media outlets. And we've got to find ways to make changes. We got to get away from the mainstream culture. And we offered alternatives, and we offered suggestions for ways that you could do that. And interestingly enough, and it seems to me that we on the right have a very short memory when it comes to that kind of stuff. It seems to me that we get worked up over things like that, and the anger, or the we get bent out of shape for a while, but we can't seem to maintain that level of, and maybe it's because anger and bitterness is not something that's easy to maintain over the long term, but we don't put it into action, I don't think, in the way that we should. Not enough of us do. One of the things that I've noticed is lots of people who have talked about disconnecting didn't disconnect. We're still in the same social media circles, and I've removed all of my personal information. And as I mentioned on those episodes, I'm not going to pull myself off of Facebook because I use it to reach out for the business. If it wasn't for that, I removed all of my personal stuff off of Facebook. I have closed out my Twitter account. I never used it much anyway. But I've seen lots of people who were decrying the bias in social media who are still there, who complain about the left-wing bias, the bias in the media, but are still watching their favorite shows on Netflix, or they're still watching the NFL, or they're still whatever, right? We don't want to give it up. And the latest thing, of course, is what happened to Gina Carano and The Mandalorian. And when it comes down to it, we get angry and we get pissed off, and we say, that's not fair. That's where I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to go watch something different. And in the end, we really just want to watch the little green monkey in the floating chair. We just don't want to stop. It's too convenient for us to stay doing what we're doing. And that's what the social media bros, the tech bros, count on. That it's too hard for you to find an alternative. It's too hard for you to go somewhere like MeWe and start over. It's too hard for you to go to Parlay, and they tried to kill Parlay, or Parler if you would prefer, and I'll Americanize it. It's too hard to start over. You like watching overpaid lefties throw around a pigskin. Okay. Just don't cry about it, about when they're complaining or when they're wearing the names of murderers and rapists on their helmets to celebrate, Black Lives Matter. Don't get bent about it. When they take a knee or refuse to come out for the national anthem, don't talk about it. Don't complain, because you're still supporting it. And you might say, well, I'm not going to be a hermit. I'm not going to support it. It's not costing me anything. They're not making any money off me sitting watching it. Yes, they are. Your account turns into advertising dollars. Your numbers watching those shows, your subscriptions, obviously Netflix, that's a different thing because you're paying for that. But if you're watching network television, that gets counted in Nielsen ratings, which they then turn around and use to determine how much their advertising dollars are worth. Facebook and Twitter made bazillions of dollars last year as we were all hunkered down in our homes, locked behind closed doors by our benevolent government, while censoring the things that we could and couldn't read or listen to, or the voices that we could and couldn't hear. And so to kind of go back to those two episodes a little bit, we've got to find alternatives. You look at what the Daily Wire is doing. Also kind of tying this back to Gina Carano. They've contracted or worked something out with Gina Carano that they're going to work together and make movies. Daily Wire is talking about making or creating alternatives to Hollywood. They created a movie called Run, Hide, Fight, which I understand, and from everything that I've seen about it, looks amazing. And it's something that I'm actually considering subscribing myself. If we're going to find alternatives, sometimes we're going to have to pay for them. If we're willing to plunk down $7 or $8 a month for Netflix, why not a few bucks for Daily Wire or for Federalist or for Epoch Times, or I don't know, some of the other ones? Find alternatives, even if it means throwing a few bucks at it, rather than continuing to do the same thing we've been doing. We need to find conservative spaces. And it doesn't mean necessary, or just spaces that are willing to listen to both sides. I don't really want one of the reasons that I haven't been hot about Gab, I don't want an echo chamber. I don't want a place where all I hear are Trump-loving right-wingers all the time. I want to hear, and certain news outlets I'm not interested in listening to as well, because all they're going to give you is the right-wing side of any issue. What we need is alternatives that are free speech alternatives. We need alternatives that are open-minded and open to discussing issues from all sides. Because I suspect it's not going to get any better. Trump talked about at CPAC today, he talked about revoking the Section 230 exemptions for the tech bros. Well, as long as the Democrats are in control, that's never going to happen. So for at least the next 2 years, if not the next 4, that's not going to happen. So what do we do in the meantime? Do we continue to sit in Facebook jail constantly, in Twitter jail, in whatever, getting kicked in the nuts and saying, "Thank you, sir, can I have another?" Thank you for only kicking me in the nuts for 7 days and not for, a permanent nonstop kick in the nuts. We've got to find some alternatives. And MeWe is one of them. Parlay, I'm still trying to get back to Parlay. I got started on Parlay, and then Parlay went away for a while, so I've forgotten about Parlay. So I've got to do better. I'm not immune. I mean, I'm doing the same sort of thing. I find myself, drifting to the same old things. It's too easy. It's too comfortable. And the tech bros know this. The tech companies, the big tech companies know this. And making a change is hard, but it's something that we're going to have to do. Let's get some comments. Hey, Dan Velt is with us. Hiya, folks. Well, it's just me, Dan. Glad to see you. Glad you are watching. Comfort can be a demon. Yes, it can. And that's, I think, the big demon that we're fighting with right now. It's just too easy for us to, I don't want to stop watching, I don't want to stop watching the kids throw the pigskin around. I don't want to stop watching baseball or watching those guys throw a ball through a hoop. Those overpaid, I'm not going to say it, but come on. Find some other alternative. Find other ways to entertain yourself. And it doesn't have to be ways that feed the leftist machine. All right, let's see. Supporting folks that share our values and or are willing at least to hear our views is important. Supporting Armed Lutheran Radio is a good start. I would agree. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Dan. No, that's very true. Especially that last sentence. Very true. But yeah, finding those outlets that share our values and throwing some money at it if it means helping them to grow. MeWe is a perfect example, and I'm not paid by MeWe. I'm not like some sort of, I'll get any money for this. This is not like a paid endorsement, so please don't think otherwise. MeWe, I think, has some sort of a premium membership thing where you pay 12 something a year, or I don't remember what it is, and you get some little perks. I don't know what they are, but I'm considering I need to do that. I need to sign up for that. And I don't know how many people do it, but it's not required. It's optional. And if it helps them grow and make the product better, see, here's what I think a lot of the problem is for people when it comes to finding alternatives is that they change to something like MeWe or Parlay or Gab or whatever, and they're like, this just isn't as easy, right? Facebook is so much easier. Twitter is so much easier. Well, yeah, they've had 20 years to however many years it's been to perfect what they're doing. And these other companies are just sort of, they're just putting it together. It takes time and it takes money. So, they're multi-bazillionaires, and the people at Gab and Parlay are not. So throw some money at some of those folks that are trying to create new opportunities in social media, and help them out. See if we can grow some of these grassroots alternatives. I think Daily Wire is a great opportunity, is one possibility. I think Federalist has something. I think, I'm trying to remember. Epic Times is another. And if you've noticed, a lot of the big newspapers, and I use a lot of them to try to research stories for the show or for our newsletter. A lot of places like New York Times, they're putting stuff behind paywall, and they're doing it because their subscriber base is falling apart. Nobody's subscribing to their print, all the news that's fit to print, the old gray lady. Nobody wants to read that crap anymore because everybody knows that it's biased and that it's not the news. You're paying for leftist opinion mostly. So they, on their, you pick up your phone and you go to their website to look at a news story, and most of it's behind paywall. And that's, I think, Washington Post is doing the same thing. And it's because the 75 or 80 million Americans who voted for Trump and are upset because of the way things turned out, who don't like the left-wing media, they're not buying those newspapers anymore because they don't trust them. And so they're having to put everything behind the paywall because nobody wants it. The difference between that and what companies like Daily Wire are doing, or The Blaze, or some of the others on the right, is that the ones on the right are trying to get started. So get out there and find something that fits what you're looking for and support them financially. Throw a few bones at them so that we can develop an alternative. Hey, George Timothy Mccall, one of our newest Gun Club members. How are you, sir? Someone recently was worried that I was sounding like a right-wing nit. I'm assuming you meant nut. When I advocated the lesser magistrate doctrine and for states to defy the federal government. What are your thoughts? We talked about the lesser magistrate doctrine on a previous episode. And I think you're right. And we saw, I'm trying to remember when this was and what it was in response to. I think it was in response. It was in response to gun control. And there were magistrates, lower magistrates. There were sheriffs around the country who were basically saying, I'm not going to be kicking down doors to uphold these new, whatever your new gun confiscation laws are. We're not going to uphold that law. And we talked about that in the context of the lesser magistrates doctrine. And I think that's exactly what we need to see happen. When when it's one thing to say, well, that kind of a law is unconstitutional. Yes, we pass unconstitutional laws all the time, however, and the only way to get rid of them directly is to go to the Supreme Court and have them ruled to be unconstitutional. But the best way for us to combat those things is to have the lesser magistrates, the politicians, the members of government that are closest to the people, to look at those laws and recognize them for what they are, as unconstitutional, and say, I'm not going to uphold that law. It's not going to happen. And if more and more of our lesser magistrates would do that, this country would be better off. And I fully support that. But that can go the other way too, because, and I think we brought this up on the show as well. If you look at the idea of sanctuary cities, which are totally where these cities along the border and in places in California and the left coast are basically saying, we're not going to comply with federal law. They are acting as the lesser magistrate and basically saying, we don't think that that current immigration law is moral. They're playing the lesser magistrate, but their definition of what's moral and what's not is different from you and me. So that can cut both ways. But in general, I fully support the idea of the lesser magistrate undercutting the unconstitutional laws passed by the federal government. Let's see here. And what did the colonialist do with tyranny? Are we afraid to say the T word? No, I hope we're not. I hope we're not afraid to say it, because, but at the same time, I think that we are, to some degree. You start to, when you use one of the defenses that when we start talking about the Second Amendment, we talk about gun rights. The core argument that everything devolves down to is the defense, the individual defense against tyranny, the tyranny of the government. And the answer that is inevitably brought against you when you make that argument is, are you seriously arguing that we're going to have a tyrannical government here in the United States, in the freest and fairest country of all? Yes, we are. And we should not be afraid to use that word. The T word is not too strong. And I think we need to be careful about throwing it around too much. It's kind of like when you start calling everything racist, or you start calling everybody Hitler, eventually, or a Nazi, those sort of words stop losing meaning. If you start calling every law you disagree with tyranny, there's a fine line there, a balance that I think you need to strike. But we shouldn't be afraid to use the word when it's warranted, and especially when it comes to the Second Amendment, and things like the Equality Act, this new bill that did it pass? I think it passed in the House. That is a real danger to our First Amendment rights. And that is tyranny. Absolutely. And we need to be very open and very honest about what we think that is. And using the T word is definitely appropriate. Just don't overdo it, so that it has that oomph when you do use it, I guess. Let's see. Let's get some more. I love it. Great comments here, guys. Dan, if people try to label you in a conversation, they've already decided they disagree with you and have put themselves in fight mode. Don't worry about what people think. Speak the truth. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. Yeah, because, once you, we do a little of our own labeling here on the show. We're not above labeling things. And we've taken some criticism from that over the years. But yeah, I mean, how do I want to respond? How do I want to say this? Trying to put my words together, and I haven't even had enough port yet to not be thinking properly. It's just been a long week, and I'm amazed that I've been able to go for 40 minutes without losing my train of thought before now. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, there is a certain element particularly in the gun rights debate, where they trot out the labels simply as a way to silence you, and you can't worry about what the names that they're going to throw at you. And I think that's a big problem, particularly for our politicians on the right, and the left knows this, that if they can call you a racist, it's the worst thing in the world to be called a racist, right? It is. It should. Nobody wants to be labeled as a racist, and they know that we don't like that, and they also know that we're not, but they know how damning those labels are, and how much they hurt, and how difficult they make it for us, because then you spend all your time fighting to defend against the label, right? The argument about whatever the policy is goes away, and it becomes, well, I have black friends too, right? So you're doing all this stuff just to kind of get out from under the label, and that the substance of the argument gets lost. So I think that's something that we should just dismiss the labels. When they start throwing names at us, they start calling us racist, they start calling us Nazis, they start calling us, the crazy people, or gun nuts, or right-wing nuts, as George said earlier. Just shrug it off. We can't, if we worry too much about the labels, like you said, then the substance of the argument gets lost, and we can't make any headway. Let's see. Let's get another comment. Guys, you guys are doing I love the comments. So I've got a Facebook user. I don't know who you are, and I good evening to you, sir or ma'am. Thank you for joining us. And a good evening. I'm assuming, George, that you're responding to the Facebook user. I don't know, or George was leaving us. I'm not sure. So in any event, great discussion tonight. I hope you've enjoyed the shows the last few weeks. We had a lot of fun with Ask the Armed Lutherans a couple of weeks ago, where we took a question and everybody answered it. And the question this last time was, talking about first guns and first shooting experiences, and first gun you bought for yourself. And that was a fun episode. And for those who are with us, if you'd like to comment, share a comment about your first gun, about the first gun you bought for yourself, maybe, or the first gun that you shot as a kid, or when you were learning. Maybe it wasn't as a kid. But that was a fun show, and the whole idea behind Ask the Armed Lutherans was really to give us a chance to sort of, for you to learn a little bit about us, a little behind the scenes, to open up a little personal side of so you can see a little personal side of us as well, and not just the professional podcaster side. If you've been listening long enough, you know that this isn't professional. This is just what it is. All right. Hey, Edwin is here. I commented before, I remember. Edwin, how are you, sir? Thank you for joining us, and a good evening to you as well. And that was Edwin who wished us all a good evening earlier. Hold on, sip time. Getting a little parched. So let's turn we got a little bit of time left. Let's talk about, let's kind of roll back to our, to the Ask the Armed Lutherans episode. Because one of the things that I mentioned in that show was I wanted to hear from you guys. I wanted to hear about your first gun experiences. So now, if you want to come on and talk about it, I shared the link on the MeWe group, and in the Facebook group click on that and join in and join us live, or share a comment, post a comment. Dan's going to be the first up. 870 Wingmaster. Bought it in high school for pheasant hunting. Still own it. Great gun. Awesome. Awesome. And back in those days, Dan, I'm sure just like me, you could probably drive to high school with that thing in a gun rack in the back of your truck, and no one would bat an eye. That wasn't even a thing. That wasn't even a problem back when I was growing up. Today, you lose your scholarships over that stuff. I had a kid in the high school where my wife worked who had gone hunting with his family over the weekend, and he left the shotgun in the floorboard in the back of his car. And somebody, I don't know why they were looking in the back of his car, but they happened to see the gun and they reported it. And of course he got in trouble and he lost his scholarship. He was had a full ride scholarship to I don't remember where. I'm not going to throw him under the bus. If I can't remember, I'm not going to guess at it, but it was a good university, and they found out about his arrest for bringing a gun to school, and they rescinded his scholarship. But somebody else, a better university, came to the rescue and gave him a full ride. So there are still some good schools out there. But yeah, that wasn't even a thing back when I was growing up. George says, my first gun experience, CZ70. Did not grow up with guns. I'm a city boy. My wife is a country girl. She said if I wanted to be with her, I'd have to like guns. You found a good woman. Now I probably have too many. CZ70. I had a CZ70. I had a CZ7. Is it CZ70? The CZ70 is like it's a little fixed barrel, kind of like based on the Walther PPK. Yeah, I agree. Totally agree with Dan there. Found a good woman. And that was a fun little gun to shoot. Snappier than you would expect, being, I want to say it's like 32 ACP. Yeah, it's like a James Bond gun, George says. It is. It's an inexpensive James Bond gun. It's not as expensive as a Walther PP. It's but it's based on the same design. It's CZ. I think mine was actually Czechoslovakian, not just a Czech Republic. And for 32 ACP, it was surprisingly snappy because it's straight blowback. And as I recall, unlike because this is a Cold War gun, right? It's 1970 and it's behind the Iron Curtain. CZ wasn't quite as they do make great guns. And Dan mentions he's got everything they've made since 1950. They make really excellent firearms. But one thing I remember about the CZ70, and George, I don't know whether this happened to you as well, was that the back end of the slide rails were really pointy. And if you got the web of your hand up too high, that thing would eat the back of your hand pretty well. Again, because it's straight blowback, you don't think it's going to recoil as much as it does. And yeah, it chewed me up a time or two. Still a fun little gun. Still a fun gun. That was one. I don't know whether you've seen this story. Let me change the banner here to get another group of thank yous in. This was a story I shared some years ago, and it's in one of my books about my trip to the mountains with my dad. The only time I was ever able to go to the mountains with my dad to shoot, I took the CZ70 with us, and that's what made me think of this. Tangents. Yeah. Let's see. Let me get one more comment. I think it made me know more about. Yeah, you learned really quick about hand placement on the CZ70. There's no question. That was one of the guns that I took with me to the one and only time I ever went shooting with my dad. And I Let's hear more stories about guns beating you up. Okay, that's cool. I can share one of those. There's actually some gun beating me up in this story. So if you haven't heard this story, if you have heard this story, I apologize for telling it again, but it's still kind of a fun story. So we'll kind of round out with this. My dad, not a big gun guy, and I've told that on the show before. Mainly his collection of guns was related to historical firearms, a lot of flintlocks and things that were handed down in the family. But he did have a World War II, an actual World War II Luger in 9mm, with a Waffenamt on it as well. So it was the real deal, and a Lee Enfield 303 from World War II. Now, if you, I'm sure we've heard these. We talk about the generation that fought World War II. We talk about them as the greatest generation. If you've never carried around a Garand or an Enfield 303 and just walked around with it for a little while, I can't imagine walking miles and miles and miles with that thing on my back. That freaking gun is so heavy. It is ridiculous. Anyway, it gives you a whole new perspective if you have not shot any of the World War II era battle rifles. Just walk around with one and shoot one for a little bit, and you'll get a whole new appreciation for that generation and what they did. Anyway, that's a whole different story. Okay. So, never was a gun guy, my dad, and so we never really went out and shot, and he wasn't a hunter or anything like that. My dad was a professor. So, we had an opportunity to go shoot one time, and so we were up in the mountains where he grew up at my grandfather's place. My dad has a log cabin up there in a big pasture, and we set up a target, and I brought a bunch of my guns. And I was fairly new into guns at this point. I was still fairly green, but I knew the rules of gun safety. Let's put it this way. And we get to shooting, and we had put the target way too far out for handguns, and we couldn't see what we were hitting. And then my dad gets out this is one of those moments when you sort of recognize how much you've learned as a gun owner and how much more you know than your own parents. And it's a strange feeling. My dad is out there. He has a Ruger 1022, which he then brings out, braces on a railing on his porch, and is whizzing rounds downrange through tree limbs at the target we have. And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? This is crazy. This is not safe. You can't be doing this. Oh, it's fine. So he does this with a 303 as well, which was a lot of fun. And it's just too far away. It's not a good target. Well, having to go out and check the target through the cow patties was not fun. That was the not fun part. So we decide we need to find somewhere else to put the target up. Dad's idea is to put a milk jug onto a steel post on either side of the road where he grew up here. There are pastures, and they're fenced in with barbed wire, and the barbed wire's got steel posts. So his idea is to set up just to put a milk jug empty milk jug on top of the steel post on one of the fence posts across the road. And I sat there for a second thinking, did he really just suggest we shoot across a paved road? That doesn't seem like a good idea. Dad, do you remember the 4 rules of gun safety by any chance? This is not a good idea. Oh, okay. All right. Well, how about this? So next suggestion, this is even better. was to take the milk jugs and put them on the other side of the field. Instead of shooting across the road, he's going to set them on top of a trough that they have set out for the cows. It's concrete. Yeah. Dad, always be aware of your target and what's beyond it. You've heard that before, have you? Dad, does this ring a bell? Hello? No, never heard that rule. And then when we're done, we go inside. One of the fun things about Dad's Luger is that the magazine sticks and it's hard to remove. So when it does get stuck, the way you remove it is you take the grip panel off to work the magazine out if it ever gets stuck. And of course, that's what he does. So we're sitting in the living room and he's working on the gun and he muzzles everyone in the room. And I look over and my son is under the table on the floor. And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? Stop. Take that outside. We'll work on it out on the porch. What are you doing? I don't know how many times I recited all the gun rules. It became not fun. You know, your first time shooting with your parents, right, is supposed to be one of these memorable moments that you're just cherished for the rest of your life. No, mine is a sideshow joke because I spent the whole time worrying somebody was going to get killed and that it was probably going to be me or my son because my dad has no idea what he's doing with guns. So that was my story, shooting with my dad. Yeah. But the 303, you said you wanted to laugh at me getting beat up by a gun. The 303 Enfield had packed some punch. That was my first time shooting a World War II battle rifle, and if you don't lean into that sucker, it will beat you up. But fun gun to shoot, fun gun. That was the fun moment. Yeah. The rest of it was just, I'm glad I survived to be able to laugh at it. So anyway, let's see. I can't click on that, so I'm not gonna share that. I know George is laughing at me. So yeah, there's my shooting with Dad story. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. Anyhow, guys, thank you so much for, I think it's about time to wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this and sharing your thoughts and your stories. And thank you for supporting the show, and God bless. Keep Pastor Bennett in your prayers and his congregation. They've had a tough couple of weeks, and Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll have another episode of Clinging to God and Guns with the pastor next week for episode 258. Don't forget, Duty to Defend signed copies are still available. Check it out at armedlutheran.us/books if you are interested, and be sure to subscribe. Smash that. Well, I'm trying to find the camera. Smash that subscribe button if you would like to get notifications next time we post content here on the YouTube channel. Trying to grow the channel a little bit, and like I said earlier, we're thinking about some ways to do that. A giveaway coming up. Probably try to do a 250 member or subscriber giveaway. So I've got some ideas, and so you'll be hearing more about that soon. Hopefully, we'll get that up and running here in the next week or so. And again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you all for your support. And be sure to tune in next week for episode 258. And if you would like to be a part of these online hangouts, be sure to join the Reformation Gun Club. Go to armedlutheran.us/gun club and check out all the benefits for as little as $1 a month. You can be a part of this and join in the fun. and help support the show. All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great evening and a great week to come. And we'll talk to you next week.